Hello there, my name's Katie Cotton and this is my book, The Secret of Splint Hall, and today I've been asked to talk a little bit about the inspiration behind it, so where it came from. So this book is about the Second World War, and the first thing I should say is that I've always loved history. It was one of my favourite subjects at school, but I know that sometimes it can all feel a bit distant, can't it? Like it happened to people a long time ago, you know, who aren't around anymore, who perhaps aren't like us. But sometimes things can happen that bring history to life for you. And the first thing that happened to me like that was that my dad one day just talked to me about being a child. So he grew up in the 60s and 70s in London. And as a child, he used to play on bomb sites. So you probably know about the Blitz. The Blitz was in London and other cities and towns around the UK. And it was a bombing campaign basically to try and break the British spirit. And a lot of streets were really damaged, a lot of houses were damaged. And these bomb sites, so sites where houses had literally been blown to smithereens, they weren't cleared for years, sometimes decades afterwards. And that made me think, gosh, what would it be like just walking down your street and just seeing an area where there's nothing there because, you know, there'd been a bomb, and that memory of the war kind of living on. And then the second thing, and the probably more powerful thing that happened to me, was that when we were young, when I was young, we had an air raid shelter in our garden. And I should point out, it was not a big house, big ground house like this. It was a 1950s terrace. Built actually after the war, but for some reason they left the air raid shelter in the garden. And I remember it so clearly. It was a sort of rectangular, squarish building, half set into the ground. It had this very rusty red corrugated iron roof and a little sort of window opening almost that was really dark, and that was the way that you got down. You had to crouch down and put your feet over the edge and then get inside. And someone had put a rope swing in there, and that's how me and my brothers used to get in. And this air raid shelter was not a nice place to be. It was full of rubbish, for one thing. I don't know who had put all the rubbish there. It wasn't us, but yeah, full of bags of stuff and goodness knows what, and mice and spiders. It was really dark and cold, and it smelt like damp, and it wasn't a nice place to be at all. And it just made me think, gosh, imagine being a child and having to spend nights down there with your family while bombs are being dropped, you know, a few streets away. You don't know if one's going to be dropped on you. You can hear the sirens. Just horrible experience to go through. So yes, as I said, that really brought the war to life for me. And then a few years later, many years later actually, we weren't living in that house anymore. I was grown up by that point. I was thinking about that air raid shelter because it stayed with me, and I suddenly thought, what if there were some children and they discovered a creature in that air raid shelter? And I'm not going to tell you what kind of creature it was. You should read the book to find that out. But that thought inspired lots of other questions. So why was that creature there? How did it get there? And that made me think, oh, what if there was this sort of underground world that most humans didn't know about, that was kind of beneath our feet and we just had no idea existed? And then that made me think, well, what if there was something scary down there? Something that perhaps, you know, the children in the story need to stop. And then again, many years later, because this is what happens sometimes, you have little ideas, but they just sit in your head for a while until they're ready to properly come out. I was thinking about the air raid shelter, I was thinking about the creature, and then the main character of the book, Isobel, just sort of popped into my head. And the first line of the book did too. And that first line is, Mum said the war was over, but Isobel thought that it was not. And that really became the starting point for the story, because Isobel is a girl who's lived through the war. She's lost her home in a bombing raid. She's lost her father. who was killed in action. And I wanted to write about how after the war, when everyone was saying, you know, the war's over, we've won, everything should go back to normal, everything's going to get better, things are great, and she just doesn't feel that way. I think a lot of people didn't really feel that way for a while afterwards. So the story is about that, but it's also about Isobel and Flora, her sister, and what they do when they discover this creature in the air raid shelter and how it leads them on an exciting adventure. So I'm Katie Cotton. This is my book, The Secret of Splint Hall. I really, really hope that you're enjoying it. Thank you for listening.